Can you believe we're approaching the end of Season 7 of Pushback Talks? When Fredrik and Leilani started the show back in 2020, the idea was to speak with people who were actively pushing back as a way to inspire each other and to build an ever-growing network of people dedicated to making change. After 4 years and nearly 100 guests, we want to ask you listeners, what do you think? You know Pushback Talks is all about figuring out how to make things better. Rate the show and leave a comment letting us know what you love about Pushback Talks and what you think we can do better. Today's guest is here to talk about making things better in Argentina, a country with a tumultuous political past and a present that's no less turbulent. In recent years, Argentina has seen a rise in political polarization and economic instability, culminating most recently in the election of President Milei, who, despite winning with over 50% of the vote, has faced backlash over the implementation of controversial policies that roll back Argentina's well-known social programs and grant him greater political control. Argentina's challenges extend far beyond the realm of politics. The country also grapples with deep-rooted social inequalities, economic disparities, and a legacy of corruption. Annual inflation stands at more than 200%. Poverty levels are at 40%, and more Argentinians are sleeping in the street than just a few months ago. The recent seismic shift in Argentina's political and economic landscape has many debating the proper path to a better future for the Argentinian people. Fredrik and Leilani are joined today by Sebastián Fest, a seasoned Argentinian journalist, political commentator, and co-host of Podcast Americas, with over 2 decades of experience covering Latin American politics. The three delve into the implications of President Milei's proposed Omnibus law, how Argentina became so expensive so quickly, and how the middle class is paying the price for these drastic economic measures.
I'm Fredrik Gerten, and I'm the filmmaker.
And I'm Leilani Farha, and I'm the advocate.
And I can hear that the advocate is a bit sick today.
I have a cold. I'm stuffed up.
Yeah, and then outside is 24 below zero.
Yeah, we had a polar vortex. It was 16 degrees yesterday, and this morning it was like minus 23.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And for our audience, I can tell we are actually recording this unnecessary extra day of February, the 29th. I mean, what? We don't need more February. Give me March, for God's sake. I want springtime.
Certainly when you're from the north. When you're from the north, you don't need the 29th of February. When you're from the south, you're loving it.
They can do it. And we're going to talk about the south. When we're doing our podcasts or our episodes, we need to do some research. And most of our research is something we do just being around people who knows things all the time. But we also listen to podcasts. And one of the podcasts I use a lot to understand what's cooking in Latin America is called Podcast Americas. And it's a very good Brazilian journalist and a very good Argentinian journalist. It's in Spanish, so it will be difficult for you, Leilani, but it's really helpful to listen to journalists who are deep into something and still have this kind of the global overview, so they don't go too deep into name dropping in details, which will be sometimes too difficult. So today we have one of the co-hosts of Podcast Americas in our show, and it's Sebastián Fest in Buenos Aires. So welcome to Pushback Talk, Sebastián.
Yeah, Fredrik, Leilani, my pleasure.
Welcome.
I met Sebastián actually in Chile when we were filming Breaking Social. That we were waiting for the newly elected Gabriel Boric to come to speak, and we were standing with all these photographers. We were standing close to each other, and we started to chat, and then we had a drink in Rio. Yeah, that's our how
Amazing.
Global we are. Yeah,
amazing. I love that.
Yeah,
what a great way to meet. Come on, what a great way to meet.
it actually is, and of course, then your country, Sebastián, which has always been a very turbulent place. You've got yourself a Twitter president. Somebody who's really playing in this new, the cultural wars of the world that we're in now. And he's totally siding up with Trump and with Bolsonaro, and we know with everybody who's like loves to provoke and have that kind of politics. So, what is happening in your country right now, Sebastian? It's a lot, isn't it?
There is a lot happening in Argentina right now. You can call it a revolution, whether you like it or not, but it is a revolution. We have a new president who is convinced that he has the formula to end with decades of decadence of Argentina, because that's true. I mean, Argentina never raised its potential in the last, would say, 80, 90 years. So many Argentinians are kind of disappointed, fed up of this situation, and they voted for Javier Milei in November last year with almost 56% of the vote. So he has a strong backup, and now he's trying to change the country in a way we have never seen before.
What we see is that because Argentina has been in some way a country that has been also protecting its citizens, Leilani. That's what you've seen.
Yeah, I mean, it's known or has been known through all of the turmoil, economic turmoil, high inflation, et cetera, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But it's always been known as also having social programs to try to catch people who are falling and who don't have money and who have needs. I'm not saying that it has always been successful, the social programs, but I am saying within the Latin American context, it has, from my perspective as someone who's a human rights lawyer who cares about social and economic rights, Argentina has been there, and there have been a lot of activists pushing the governments of Argentina to make sure that there are social programs. And that seems to be directly on Milei's list of things to erode.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that exactly. I mean, it is true that Milei has that checklist, as Leilani said, where he wants to erase from the face of earth a lot of things. But you can't rule Argentina right now without social programs, because you have, let's say, 40, 45, 50, 57, who knows at this stage of the population in poverty. And he knows that, and everyone knows that. What they are trying to do is to reorganize the system. And that's a question, whether they will succeed or not, and whether behind this reorganization of the system, which is needed because there were a lot of abuses in the last years, whether behind this reorganization there is some other intention. I can't say that right now. I mean, I'm not sure whether there is a bad intention, but there is a lot of debate. There are also people saying that because of this reorganization, a lot of food convoys, a lot of food for the poverty, for the poor people in the country is not arriving. And if this is true, yeah, that would be a big problem, and we would notice it quite soon. I mean, if you walk in the streets of Buenos Aires, let's say right now, but I was last week in Mendoza also, you see much more people sleeping in the streets than 4 or 5 months ago. This is impressive. So there is something happening, no doubt. But going back to the start of my answer, I don't see Milei able to cut the social program, because if he does this, he won't last as a president. I mean, he simply can't do that.
But he was trying to push through a special law, and they call it the Omnibus law, which is like a bus law. I don't know what it represents, but it basically was a legislation that should hand over all control to the president in like 300 different areas. But it didn't. What was his intention with that?
Yeah, you know, Milei has been recently described as an unidentified political object, which is not a bad description. And when I watch and listen to him, I have been doing this for quite a long time. At times, I think he comes out from a test tube, from a labor. I mean, he's strange, he's weird, and he's a guy who really believes that everything is linked to the economics, that economics explains everything and can solve everything. So in that way, you can think that this Omnibus law, that this mammoth law with more than 600 articles that didn't go through the parliament, was an intention to change Argentina absolutely, totally, in a way we have never seen before. He couldn't, and now he's going to try with smaller laws, with more focused laws in order to start his program. He has also this decree, this big decree he signed in December with a lot of changes too, which is now checked at the parliament and might be a failure too. He might not be able to govern through this decree. And in these days, he's also giving the kind of State of the Union address at the parliament. And we are following him because we want to see whether, if the parliament says no to him, he's able to accept that, or he will turn into a different kind of president and a non-democratic one. That's a big question right now.
Yeah. And the story about Milei is that he has no political background. In some way, he also reminds on Trump, who also came from, not from being an active politician. He came from somewhere else. I mean, even if Trump is a billionaire and he, in some way, much more represent almost like a corrupt world. So Milei has a different background that might not be as compromised, but he has no experience. So to be able to, if you don't have majority in the Congress, you need some skills to be a politician, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there are some similarities between Milei and Trump, and we have seen both of them at that ultra-conservative conference in Washington a few days ago, hugging and very happy in the 1.5-minute conversation they had. But at the same time, there are some differences. I mean, first, Trump was very famous for decades. I mean, and no one knew Milei like 5 years ago. He turned a popular person in TV, shouting. You might have seen a lot of videos of the way he expressed himself. But before that, before 2017, let's say, no one knew who was Javier Milei. That's a big difference between him and Trump. I would say there is another big difference at this moment right now, which is about the Ukraine and Russia war. Milei is totally with Ukraine, totally with the president of Ukraine, who has been visiting Buenos Aires for his inauguration. If you listen to Trump, you listen what you listen. So there is a big difference there in a very important political issue. And Milei is, again, really fixed to economics, while Trump can talk about lots of things. It is true that in the entourage of Milei, you have some people who want to have this cultural war, which is kind of the same of Trumpism, but it's not really the big dream of the president. The president wants to be the best. He's, by the way, the first guy who learned economics, who has an economics degree at the university, ruling the country. And this is remarkable, considering that Argentina has been having always very, very, very big problems in terms of its economic situation. No?
Yeah.
But he's not just any economist. He's a libertarian, right? In terms of his economic theories are more than neoliberal. I mean, really, it seems to me libertarian. And it seems to me that he wants to administer and is already administering austerity measures.
Yeah, I mean, Milei is a fanatic. There's no doubt of that. No? He's a libertarian, as you say. And his deep desire would be to have no state, which is also kind of a contradiction, because now that he's the head of state, he noticed that there are a lot of things that he can do and steer being at the head of state. But his deep, intimate desire would be, okay, there is no state and every individual decides what he does. This is not possible, but this is deep in his mind. He's a libertarian, he's extreme liberal, but liberal not in the sense, in the United States sense or in the American sense, but from the economical side. And he's sometimes, when you listen to him, a conservative, but sometimes not. He's, for instance, not at all against gay marriage, but he has been forbidding the inclusive language and the the way we speak in Spanish when we want to speak in a different way that we have been speaking for decades now, which is something that the leftist government have pushed a lot in the last years. So he's one in a kind. He's very contradictory, but I would say that the right word to describe him is that he's a fanatic. And to have a fanatic as a head of state, it's always a danger.
It totally is. Leilani, when we talk about economics, I certainly start to think about our best friends from Push and the housing market, Blackstone. And we know Blackstone has a head of, a president who is a very close friend to Trump. But the big player in Argentina, the big owner of the Argentina's foreign debt, is the other black one, BlackRock. And Larry Fink, who is then known as to be a Democrat. and BlackRock are really huge in Argentina. And I read now that Larry Fink might go to Buenos Aires and meet with Milei, because Milei also wants to sell out parts of his country, oil wells and national companies and mining rights and so on and so on. So this is like we can see these players are out there. And Sebastian, I mean, the foreign debt has always been like almost one of the big challenges for any Argentinian government for 50 years. It's like since the military dictatorship, the foreign debt is like something being inherited from government to government, and that's given a lot of powers to these big banks in the US.
Yeah, I mean, foreign debt is always an issue here, as in the center of the political debate. For instance, I don't know any country where the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is so popular, let's say, as in Argentina. I mean, everyone knows the IMF, everyone has an opinion about the IMF. So yeah, that's also some distinctive aspect of Argentina. I think, as you know, every country has a foreign debt, or every country has a debt. I mean, let's say the United States, no? A huge debt. The big problem with Argentina is that we don't have credit. And we don't have credit because we were not able, basically, to run our economy, I wouldn't say even in a proper way, but in a slightly proper way. And the debate here is always between, okay, the IMF is saying us what to do, and this is wrong, and there are the rulers of our economy and our country, and we have to be liberated of that. But at the same time, we are the ones that always go back to the IMF. So it's a very contradictory situation where if we would be able to exploit the potential of the country, because this country has a big potential, not really, we haven't really been taking advantage of it in the last decades, I think the foreign debt wouldn't be such a big problem. Because, for instance, there was a huge political turmoil in the last weeks here when the central government didn't send a payment to a governor from the Patagonia. And, okay, that governor even said that he would cut off the gas and oil provision to the rest of the country. And the whole debate was because of 13 million euros. 13 millions, 1 trillion, not 13,000, no, 13 millions. So when you see the figures in Argentina, you see that they are not that big in comparison with other countries, with Europe, even to Brazil. So when I listen to the IMF, I say, oh my God, these guys are saying the same decade after decade. They get such huge salaries and privileges and benefits for doing this. It's, ridiculous. But at the same time, I think we are the ones who could go out of this trap, even if the IMF wants to harm us.
On the other side, this is like, we in the film Push, and you and I, Leilani, we met with the Nobel Prize winner Joseph Stiglitz, who has been very active in Argentina and advising governments, and so he's also been very critical to to BlackRock and the other lenders to Argentina. I'm suddenly thinking about Joe Biden wants to forgive the student loans in the US to lift something out of people's life. So all these big funds like BlackRock could also take a step out. But for sure, Larry Fink has always been there to say, no, we want our money. And they always put conditions on it. So every government has been, Leilani.
Well, you'll remember, Fredrik, in Peter S. Goodman's book, Davos Man, he has a chapter that talks about BlackRock's involvement in Argentina and how BlackRock stepped on the neck of Argentina, expecting repayment of loan at a time when Argentina was unable to really do so, ended up doing so at the cost of what? People in the country and their well-being. And I think it's so interesting, these conversations about, there's no doubt, like, from the little I know, and I really know a little of Argentina, I've only been there a few times, there's little doubt that it's an economic system that isn't working. Anyone can see that. For years and years, it isn't working. And so reform of some sort is necessary. The people wanted reform, right? The question is this the way to go about it? And Sebastian, I'm a human rights lawyer. And so I always ask, well, what does human rights demand? And human rights demands that even when there is a corrupt or ill-functioning economic system, the well-being of people has to be maintained. Right to food, right to water, right to housing, to education, to health, those basic necessities of life, because, of course, there is the right to life. And the government of Argentina has made those commitments through international treaties, which it has signed, legally binding treaties. And so when I'm looking at Milei, I'm saying, okay, well, if he wants no government, yeah, that's his fanatical position, you said, Sebastian, right? No government. Well, then how do social programs continue to run? I read in an Al Jazeera article that he is saying, he calls them poverty managers. So the people who are administering food kitchens, community kitchens, it's like, we call them in North America, like food banks, where people who have no food go to, for an extra meal in a month or a week or daily or whatever. And they're saying that they're not receiving the funds that they would normally receive to run these food kitchens. So I'm thinking, okay, well, to me, his policies are already, you said there's more homelessness on the street. And I read that too, like a very sharp increase suddenly of homeless people. To me, it means that he is already running afoul of his human rights commitments. He may say, well, I didn't make them, but the state of Argentina did make them. And just because he's now the leader doesn't mean he is absolved from those.
Oh, I got your point. You might know that there are some international treaties included in our constitution, for instance, this San Jose de Costa Rica Pact. And there are certain things that no one can do, even if the president wants to do that, unless they do a putsch, which is also not possible in Argentina. This country is not Peru, let's say. We would find a way. And Milei, he has a strong minority in the parliament, so if he goes further doing something crazy, he would basically send out of the Casa Rosada, of the Pink House. So, he has no power to do certain things. At the same time, he's very skilled in what is very important right now in our world, which is social media. And with these social media skills, he is driving and turning the country into a mad situation, because he has always the initiative of the public debate. And everyone is like trailing him back. He sends an idea, he says something, and the whole debate is around that social media post of Javier Milei. I have to say you that one of the last weekends, he did like 7,000 social media interactions between Saturday and Sunday in only 2 days. So that's crazy, but this explains a lot too.
And you said I was reading a column of yours, Sebastian, in the Spanish newspaper El Mundo, where you work, and you said that the social media manager of Milei, who is it?
Yeah, I mean, he has several social media managers, but he had one who was 21, 22 years old, and on his first days in the position, he put a picture of himself and his girlfriend wishing all the Argentinians a Merry Christmas. And then he reposted it in the Casa Rosada account, so he was fired. But now he's like ruling or running Milei's TikTok. And then you have another guy who was, until a few weeks ago, kind of the director of a libertarian news site called La Derecha Diario, so the right-wing daily. And now he's in charge of the political communication of the government.
But Milei is also like Trump. He's posting a lot himself all the time.
Absolutely. I mean, that's Twitter and Instagram. I mean, Milei's Twitter is run by Milei. He's the one doing that. And they've calculated in that mad Saturday-Sunday combination, he spent 8 hours and 14 minutes, no? If you consider that a weekend has 48 hours, okay, you can figure out what is he doing.
Wow, incredible. But at the same time, I mean, he's doing some very concrete things that are also maybe fanatical. I don't know. I'm not an economist, but he devalued the peso, right? The Argentinian peso, which destabilized a lot of households, I think. I don't know. I mean, the market basket, we call it like a basket of goods, became more expensive as soon as he devalued the peso, which makes then it harder for people to get food and what they need to survive. Like, these are very drastic things and concrete things.
Yeah, basic things. And you're right. I mean, at the same time, Argentine economics is very complicated because it is true that he devaluated the peso from 400 for each dollar to 800. But at the same time, the dollar you can really buy, or you could really buy back then, was 1,100, 1,200. You have a clandestine market to buy dollars because the state, the government, the state banks, they are not selling you the dollar at the official rate. So to move the rate from 400 to 800 was kind of recognizing some level of reality, even though the real dollar is right now around 1,050 or something like this. But the basic goods, I mean food, electricity, whatever, the inflation in that area, in that aspect, is huge. I mean, and when you say huge inflation to Europe or to North America, you say, oh, what happened? 10%, and we would dream about that. I mean, is 50, is 80, is 150, is 300, is 400. I mean, it is incredible. I mean, Milei, what Milei achieved in these first 3 months in government, barely 3 months, is to turn a country which was cheap for a foreigner in dollars, in euros, whatever, into a quite expensive country right now. I mean, the increase of the value of the goods, measuring it in dollars, not in pesos, was 40% in 2 months. And this is terrible because, I mean, the salaries had not increased. So right now, Milei came into government promising that he would solve things, punishing the caste, what he says, the casta, the privileged ones. But the truth right now is that the ones who are paying these drastic economic measures is the middle class and the poor. But as I said, some welfare system for the poor are still running, although many things are not working as they used to work. That's true. But the middle class, which is the main nerve of Argentina, this has been traditionally a big middle class country, they are suffering like hell.
Yeah. I was the first time in Argentina, I think 88, and I was back 90. And so that was also hyperinflation, it was like a crazy time. And then I was back and made a film after the big crash in 2001. when people who had moved back from 40 years working in England or wherever put their money into the bank, and then suddenly they closed all the bank machines. Nobody can get their money out. So the cash machines were closed, and then people, when they got their money back, it was 50% down. So there is a deep tradition of the middle class losing out. And what I found out at that time, and I would also say that my experience from Argentina at that time has led to now Breaking Social. In some ways, the understanding of that the middle class, they can work hard, they can try to grow, but they don't stand a chance when the big economics is moving, like in Argentina, or maybe also now in many other places in the world. But then the super rich, I mean, at that time, you could actually follow the money, rushing out of the country to banks in Uruguay or to Switzerland or to US. And it's some of the political crisis in Argentina or financial crisis are also been based of big capitals moving out extremely rapidly out of the country. And it's almost like a financial coup d'etat. So there's a deep tradition, and of course the Argentinians are super good at surviving anyway. Every Argentinian knows that there will be a crash coming up the next 5 years. It's not like here that people get surprised. You're extremely used to that, and you find your ways to survive.
But U.S. dollars under the mattress.
Yeah, I mean I guess there are different ways and this clandestine exchanging of money in very strange places. You walk up a back door. It's been there for like 30 years or 40 years or more. I don't know. It's nothing new. When I was listening to another Latin American ex-president before the elections, you have Pepe Mujica, the legendary president of Uruguay, and he said the problem with Argentina is the Peronistas. The movement from the ex-dictator Perón in the 40s all the way up to left-wing Peronistas, right-wing Peronistas. It's been all this kind of. It's a very special movement, and that's a movement who are now out of power. Can you say that this is the problem? Is he right, Mujica?
I mean, Mujica has a way to say things that you want always to listen to him and to start a debate, no? And that's good. I mean, he should have been some TV anchor or something like this, but he's good. And he knows our country, he knows Argentina. I mean, you said, for instance, when you talk about Perón, you said the dictator of dictatorship, which is something many Argentinians and many Peronists would deny, but it's true. I mean, Perón was even part of the coup d'etat in 1930 when they end democracies, when radical Hipólito Yrigoyen was the president. So if you think that Peronism has been more or less, if not ruling the country, influencing the country in a very strong way from 1945, you have to consider that they have a big responsibility in what is happening in Argentina, what happened in Argentina. So I tend to agree to Mujica that Peronism has not been good for Argentina. I mean, I said a few minutes ago that it is very difficult to explain Argentine economics, but how do you explain a political movement who has the extreme right and the extreme left at the same time, and that can be neoliberal in the 90s and then say neoliberalism is the worst thing ever and rule the country again? So I think that's, in a political way, not good for a country, because you can't really understand what's happening. You can't really, have a political system, because one of the main actors is, it's like a phantom. What is the person? We don't know. So I tend to agree with Mujica, although you have a bigger and deeper discussion about this.
Yeah, but I think one of the interesting thing, Sebastian, is that the Peronistas are they are organizing the unions, they are organizing in all levels of society. They also organize employers. I mean, there are, in some ways, it's a very special force. But now Milei is in some ways also confronting a very well-organized force in the country. It's not like in some other country in Latin America. The Peronistas have a very strong base organization. And I guess that Milei now has to confront this on all levels, in the Congress, in all the regions, in the cities, but also on the streets. So this is what we are seeing. This is happening right now on the streets in Argentina.
Yeah, at the same time, you have a lot of Peronists in Milei government, no? And has a good relation with some Peronists. And when you ask him who was the best president of these 40 years of Argentine democracy, he says Menem was a Peronist. He was the neoliberal Peronist, but he was a Peronist. And he's against the unions in the way they work here, because I don't know how does it work in Sweden, for instance, or in the United States. But, I mean, to be part of a union in Argentina, it means you have to be a Peronist. And this is probably not right, no? Isn't it? So there is a system here which resembles a lot to Mussolini in some aspects. And some part of the Peronism has been stuck to that. Carta del Lavoro, all these things from the 30s, the 40s. So this is something that not only Milei wants to change, I mean, Macri wanted to change that. Raúl Alfonsín, the first presidency of Argentine's democracy, who was from the Social Democrat Radical Party, his first big failure was to try to reform the whole union system, and he couldn't pass it through the Senate. So the unions in Argentina have been a consistent problem. At the same time, and as Leilani said at the start of this conversation, there are certain things in Argentina that can happen and that happen in other countries. I mean, the workers here are much more protected than in other countries. And this is, of course, a good thing. But there are certain aspects of this good thing that are not good, if you can understand what I mean.
Leilani, we are wrapping up this conversation. So, do you any last thoughts?
Well, yeah, I'm paying close attention to what's happening in Argentina now, especially with March 8th coming up, which is International Women's Day, and I understand the feminists have said that they are going to make it clear how they feel about how Milei is doing at the moment on that day, and that they're joining with the unionists, I believe, with the unions to say this isn't okay. So I'll be interested to see that protest. I've seen there have been so many protests. I have one last question for Sebastian. So, I mean, Milei received so much support through the vote, through the election. Did the people who are now protesting, including this big middle class who were, outside the door of this new human capital ministry demanding more and better and aid, did they not know what would happen once he was elected? Did they not foresee this is how it would go?
I think the answer is no, they didn't. I mean, because Milei's promises was the big one, the stronger one was the dollarization. Okay, forget the peso, we all have dollars. Okay, I don't know, maybe we have $20 in the pocket and not more. So he didn't explain that. And he couldn't do that yet. I mean, he's kind of suggesting that he will do it by the end of the year or next year. Okay, when you live through such a high inflation all your life, you hate peso. You can understand that. And when someone comes and say, I will give you dollars instead of pesos, you say, wow, that's the guy. But at the same time, as I said, when he said always that he would cut all the privilege to the powerful ones and to this caste in politics, I mean, I was convinced that's not the problem in Argentina. I mean, you have bigger problems than that. But many people were like wanting to believe that this was the case, that this was the solution. You can't forget that Argentina, as any other country of the world, was in a pandemic couple of years ago. So many people changed their way of thinking. Many people faced death. And they said, okay, I'm fed up. I vote this crazy guy. And I mean, you asked me about Milei's personality at the start of this conversation. I mean, I'm pretty sure you have read this or you have heard this, but Milei was mistreated, was despised, was beaten by his father when he was a young guy. And you could say that he harbors resentment. And at the same time, this resentment, this past, this personal past, is what gives him the strength and the will to succeed and to do what he's doing. And yeah, this resentment is also installed or part of many Argentinians who say, okay, I'm fed up. I don't want to live in a country that every 5 years, 10 years destroys my savings. I want to change. Which change? We don't know. And the change is Milei. So let's see what happens now. Maybe it was not the change Argentina needed, but as you said, people voted for him. In the first round, he got only 30%, but in the ballotage, he got 56%, and that's enough to win a presidency.
Yeah. We'll see. I mean, we saw Bolsonaro had also almost the same kind of numbers when he won the presidency in Brazil. And then he didn't win the re-election, and so there's quick turns in the politics of Latin America, and for sure the world has gotten a new Twitter president, a new guy who knows how to move focus away and make us talk about stupid things. That's the technique of the Trumps and the Bolsonaros and many, many others. And I think for us who want to talk about real challenges for societies, it's also a challenge to keep the focus talking about the real stories, because they are so good at moving the conversation into the wrong place. So that's something we still have to find a way how to do, because this is not an Argentinian problem. This is like something we are facing everywhere. And I mean, Leilani, I know you are extremely engaged in what's happening right now in Gaza, which is very hard not to talk about when we are here. And it's the war against the Palestinians in Gaza is now also a part of a cultural war. So it's like a lot of people who didn't have so much opinions about this before, or didn't even, I mean, in Sweden, for example, this ex-Nazi party that is very big here, they are best friends with the settlers in the Israeli government. And you see Milei is also stepping out in support of the Israelis, and he wants to move the embassy. And Bolsonaro had a big rally in Sao Paulo recently with Brazilian and Israeli flags, because President Lula came out and said that what is happening in Gaza is a genocide. So you can see this game is running around in a crazy way, and I don't know. I think we still have to try to stay decent in our language and do our best to keep the conversation going.
Well, and as you say, focus on the actual issues. What I find remarkable, the similarities across the world, is this weaponization of food. It is unbelievable to me that governments would ever use food as a way to control a population. It's not unbelievable to me, actually. It's just very deeply troubling. I mean, look at how people are being starved around the world. I mean, it's including, of course, in Gaza, and people are dying of starvation. But it's the weaponization of food. If we can keep on the issues, that's the trick.
Let's do that. Let's keep on the issues. And Thank you, Sebastian, for being in our podcast. I hope you will be up again with the Podcast Americas, because I really want to follow you. It's really, really cool. I can say I've got some. We got some comments from listeners, and it's kind of nice, because there is somebody who wrote on the Spotify comment section. You can write on any comment section. Do that, please. But this is about the South Africa, Israel, Palestine episode we did with Sylvia Bollenhoven. It's Ryan Lee Seddon who wrote, amazing episode, so refreshing to hear the points that need to be said, focused on and discussed. Events are moving quickly, so it was good to see frank discussion on topics. Frank discussion on topics. That's
us. Frank.
That's us. That's cool.
It's because we don't know very much, so we have to be very frank.
Exactly. But we are growing in knowledge, Leilani.
We are, and I learned a lot, Sebastian. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, Leilani, it was a privilege to talk to you, Leilani and Fredrik. I learned a lot too, because you learn when you try to explain your country, especially in English. And yeah, we will be back with Podcast Americas in 2 weeks. So I hope there are some listeners here. There is someone in the audience who listens and who can understand Spanish. So we invite them to join us too.
We have audience in 160 countries. So, and a lot of them are also Spanish speaking. So, I mean, for sure there will be 1 or 2 listeners going your way also. I'm sure. Thank you, Sebastian. Step out to the summer of Buenos Aires, and Leilani, stay at home because it's 24 below zero. And it's actually sunny in Malmo, so I will be on my bike very soon. Have a good evening, and thank you very much. See you soon.
Thanks.
Pleasure.
Pushback Talks is produced by WG Film. To support the podcast, become a patron by going to patreon.com/pushbacktalks. Follow us on social media at make_the_shift and push_the_film. Or check out our websites, maketheshift.org, pushthefilm.com, or breakingsocialfilm.com.